Welcome to Around the Empire, the show that takes you around the U.S. Empire. I'm your host, Dan Wright.
I'm your co-host, Joanne Leon.
And on today's episode, February 17th, 2017, we speak to Kenneth Lipp about the national security state and private intelligence services. Before we do that, here is Around the Empire.
We begin our news from around the empire with the United States Northern Command, the home front. President Trump's national security advisor, Michael Flynn, was forced to resign last week. Trump named active duty Army Lieutenant General H.R. McMaster to replace Flynn, a decision which appears to please the foreign policy establishment, otherwise known as the Blob by President Obama, or the Borg. There has been a lot of speculation about the Flynn situation. One of the most surprising things is that various people in the media, both mainstream and alternative independent media, are now openly saying it was a political assassination by the deep state. Here's some excerpts from Glenn Greenwald's analysis.
Trump's agenda that he ran on was completely antithetical to what the CIA wanted. Clinton's was exactly what the CIA wanted, and so they were behind her. What they're doing instead is trying to take maybe the only faction worse than Donald Trump, which is the deep state, the CIA, with its histories of atrocities, and say they ought to almost engage in like a soft coup. There's a huge difference between the two, which is that Trump was democratically elected and is subject to democratic controls, as these courts just demonstrated, as the media is showing, as citizens are proving. But on the other hand, the CIA was elected by nobody. They're barely subject to democratic controls at all. And so to urge that the CIA and the intelligence community empower itself to undermine the elected branches of government is insanity. That is a prescription for destroying democracy overnight in the name of saving it.
Dennis Kucinich, no ally of Trump or Flynn, said the intelligence community is playing a dangerous game with our national security, which may lead us into more wars, and they're working to undermine the elected government. At the Munich Security Council, John McCain gave a speech in defense of the neoliberal world order. Framing the debate as the survival of quote-unquote the West, McCain claimed that only the United States could rule the world because it promoted so-called universal values of rule of law, open commerce, and respect for national sovereignty and independence. McCain's most pronounced gripe was that people in the United States and Europe were uninterested in waging aggressive warfare to maintain that neoliberal world order, or Pax Americana. He framed it as a lack of will.
But what would alarm them most, I think, is a sense that many of our peoples, including in my own country, are giving up on the West. That they see it as a bad deal that we may be better off without. And that while Western nations still have the power to maintain our world order, it's unclear whether we have the will. Make no mistake, my friends, these are dangerous times. But you should not count America out. And we should not... We must be prudent, but we cannot wring our hands and wallow in self-doubt. We must appreciate the limits of our power, but we cannot allow ourselves to question the rightness and goodness of the West.
And now we shift to the United States European Command. Again at the Munich Security Council, Ukraine President Poroshenko said that some members of President Trump's cabinet reassured him with a, quote, message of solidarity to Ukraine, unquote. Poroshenko warned against any kind of appeasement or deal with Russia.
My message is very simple. Nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine. Any deal with Putin behind Ukraine would only aggravate the situation.
Over the weekend, the New York Times broke a story about a, quote, back-channel plan, unquote, a peace proposal between Ukraine and Russia. This plan was reportedly hand-delivered to Michael Flynn's desk a week before his resignation by Michael Cohen, Trump's personal lawyer. The other people involved were Felix Sater, a Russian-American business associate with a kind of shady past, and Andriy Artemenko, a member of an opposition party in the Rada, the Ukraine parliament, generally favored by Russia. The peace proposal, the alleged peace proposal, would involve Ukraine leasing Crimea to Russia for a long-term lease and a lifting of the Russian sanctions in exchange for the withdrawal of Russian support for the rebel forces in eastern Ukraine. Artemenko claims to have damaging material on Poroshenko, which could lead to his ouster. It's not clear if that material was included in the peace plan documents that made their way to the White House somehow. Trump claims that he wouldn't recognize Mr. Sater in a room. His lawyer, Mr. Cohen, denied delivering the plan to the White House, but he said he did meet Sater and Artemenko and discuss their plan for world peace with them for about 15 minutes in a Manhattan hotel. The Kremlin spokesman denied any knowledge of it, and the Poroshenko government has opened a treason inquiry on Mr. Artemenko for drawing up that peace proposal. Moving on to the United States Central Command, via Reuters and the Middle East Eye, Syrian rebel sources reported that, quote, CIA coordinated military aid for rebels in the northwest of Syria has been frozen since they came under a major attack from hardline militants last month, unquote. Al-Qaeda led an attack on some Free Syrian Army, FSA groups, which led to their joining Ahrar al-Sham, who previously were allied with Al-Qaeda and even ISIS. Turkey, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia funneled money and weapons to the FSA groups via the CIA, quote, Mom Operations Room, and some of the sources expect this halt in supplies and funding to be temporary until the rebels form a unified force. The Trump administration campaigned on refocusing the fight in Syria toward ISIS alone. The U.S.-led coalition in eastern Syria continues to move toward Raqqa. Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Dunford, visited Turkey for talks on a possible joint operation to recapture Raqqa. Turkey later announced that they would not directly be involved, but would provide support to the Raqqa operation. Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu said that the U.S. and Russia have a common enemy in Syria, ISIS. He said, quote, our task is to pool efforts. We have all opportunities for that. We have everything at our disposal for cooperating effectively. Absolutely everything. There are no hindrances to starting this work together. If we are to use very specific terms today, it might be possible to start joint operations in Raqqa. We should make a pause, sit down, and start to talk normally, unquote. Just a few days earlier, though, the new U.S. Secretary of Defense Mattis, both en route and at Munich, didn't seem very open to that idea.
2014 was a watershed year. It was a year when many of our hopes for some kind of partnership with Russia were finally shown to be unavailing. So what we have to do, we've got to adapt and make certain that the transatlantic bond remains strong. The alliance remains a fundamental bedrock for the United States and for all the transatlantic community, bonded as we are together. As President Trump has stated, he has strong support for NATO.
ISIS-affiliated jihadi groups attacked Free Syrian Army FSA rebel groups in southern Syria, near the Golan Heights and near the border with Israel. They captured a town and several villages, some of which were recaptured by the Southern Front groups allied with the FSA groups, and supplied by an operations room in Jordan. During his state visit to the White House, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu asked President Trump to recognize the Golan Heights as part of Israel. Israel seized the Syrian territory in 1967, and they annexed it in 1981, but it has never been recognized internationally. So during a briefing with the media, Netanyahu was asked if he raised the Golan issue with Trump. And Reuters reported that Netanyahu said yes, he did, and that Trump was not surprised by his request, but no direct answer about what Trump's response was. And now we come to the United States Southern Command. Ecuador held elections over the weekend, and the current ruling party candidate, Lenin Moreno, is the frontrunner. But he didn't get enough votes for a first-round win, so the election's gone to a runoff. between Moreno and Guillermo Lasso, who is a right-wing ex-banker. Among other things, Lasso has pledged to remove WikiLeaks' Julian Assange from the Ecuadorian embassy in London, while Moreno won't. But Moreno did say that Assange would need to reduce his meddling in U.S. policies while he has asylum there. On his first day on the job, the new U.S. Treasury Secretary sanctioned Venezuelan Vice President Tarek al-Isami, 42-year-old lawyer and criminologist, for alleged drug trafficking. Under the Kingpin Act, al-Isami is a, quote, longtime confidant and member of Chavez's and Maduro's inner circles. Maduro recently gave him much wider powers, indicating that he might become the next president. El-Assami called it a, quote, miserable provocation by Washington. On Twitter he said, quote, "These miserable provocations do not distract us. Our main task is to accompany Nicolas Maduro in economic recovery. Let us focus on the priorities of the revolutionary government: recovery, economic growth, and guarantee peace and social happiness," unquote. The Venezuelan foreign minister said that it was, quote, lamentable and highly dangerous, unquote, for the new Trump government to, quote, perpetuate the historic mistakes against Venezuela, unquote, that his predecessor, President Obama, has made. Up until now, the Maduro government had not criticized the Trump government. On to the United States Pacific Command. One day after China issued warnings about its sovereignty in the region, the USS Carl Vinson aircraft carrier began quote-unquote routine patrols in the South China Sea. 3 articles I read about this, all of them had routine in quotes, and I'm quite sure why. The USS Carl Vinson, a Nimitz-class supercarrier with more than 60 aircraft, will be accompanied by the USS Wayne E. Meyer, a guided missile destroyer. The new Secretary of State Rex Tillerson has said that China should be blocked from accessing the artificial islands that it built up, and there are weapon systems on those islands. This doesn't sound good. Finally, the United States African Command. On February 17th, Libyans marked the 6th anniversary of their revolution, quote unquote. Chinese media interviewed some Libyans and found that most regret overthrowing Gaddafi, not because of their love for him, but because of the alternative. Jalal Fitouri, a professor, said, quote, "When we demonstrated against the regime, we were dreaming of freedom and enjoying our wealth. However, we are now surrounded by criminals and warlords. Instead of enjoying our oil wealth, poverty is increased and citizens are helpless." Ibtasim Naili, a nurse, said, quote, "Those who demonstrated against Gaddafi's regime in 2011 were fooled by Libyan politicians abroad who wanted power so badly. They took the power by brainwashing young Libyans," unquote. And Najwa Ahami, a human rights activist, said, "How could it be a people's revolution when 3/4 of the people supported Gaddafi?" unquote. And at the Munich Security Conference, with echoes of the Cold War era, British Defense Secretary Michael Fallon grumbled about the Russians interfering in Libya and their recent visit with the military commander in eastern Libya, Khalifa Haftar. Sir Michael Fallon said, quote, "We don't need the bear sticking its paws in. Putin is testing the West. He's testing the alliance. At any point where he sees a weakness, he pushes home." And in Egypt, oil companies are bullish, as their giant Zohr gas field, discovered in 2015, is set to come online this year. Egypt has had to import gas in recent years, but now it expects to become a net exporter and, quote, "seeks to transform itself into a gas trading hub for its own and other emerging Mediterranean producers," unquote. Developers expect to find more gas and also to find oil. You can find more information like this in our Global War News Roundups, the next Cold War section at shadowproof.com.
and that was Around the Empire. Today's guest, Kenneth Lip, is a journalist who's written extensively on the security state and incarceration and other issues. And how you doing, Ken?
I'm good. How are you, Dan, Joanne?
Hey, Ken, how you doing?
Good.
Great to have you.
And this is a great time to have Ken on. A number of stories he's done that work into our current odd predicament. One that comes to mind is, two that come to mind actually, are Project Hemisphere, which was this private contract or private service, I guess, AT&T offers to law enforcement. And another one was a story Ken did on a big friend of ours, Thomas Drake, who was, who was a whistleblower, really, by every stretch of the imagination, but has been, was used in part of a PowerPoint presentation about bad people within organizations. And what's interesting, I think, kind of what I want to get you to sort of jump off point is that Donald Trump, who, everybody, at least on the left now and the Democratic Party thinks is this terrible guy, is inheriting one of the most effective and expansive security states or incarceration states probably ever assembled, but he's inheriting it. And the problem is a lot of people didn't have any real issues with this stuff when Barack Obama was doing it, including what's really relevant in today's news, because there was a story that now it may have been a false story that the Associated Press ran about National Guard units being nationalized to be part of an immigration deportation force. There's some pushback on whether that memo was really taken seriously. There was a draft memo, but it wasn't clear. But Trump is inheriting a very expansive network that Obama established on criminalization, on deportation, on a militarized border. Obama pushed out 2.5 million people, over 2.5 million people during his term, a record. So, I mean, as someone who studied this, Ken, are you worried about Trump inheriting the state?
I've never. I don't want to be too superlative, but at the same time, it's kind of hard not to believe that he's going to do just about anything, because he said Muslim ban and we got us a Muslim ban. He said mass deportations. He actually used the words deportation force. He said there will be a deportation force and it'll be as humane as possible. So I think it's certainly plausible to believe that he's going to mobilize. We know that he has to mobilize more personnel if he wants to get rid of anything close to those 3 million people. So I think it's really concerning, that Obama has put into place not the mechanisms to do it. What Obama put in place was the mechanism to maximize that system, to keep the system in place. You're not really trying to get rid of all the detainees. You're maintaining the courts and maintaining the detention facilities.
Right. And I think there's also a larger, point about this, and some of your work's focused on that, so it's good to have you here, is there's something what the Chinese call the bad emperor problem, which is you have this great, state that has all this power and capacity and it's centralized control. And the upside is if you have a good emperor, which many people, not myself, but many people thought Obama was, they thought he was a great president, responsible. It's all great to have that centralized power until you have a bad emperor. And then you have a bad emperor problem. And I'm wondering if you're seeing anyone or you want to comment on people not at the time recognizing that we were going to have a bad emperor problem. The minute, maybe you liked Obama a lot, but at some point there was going to be someone who wasn't Barack Obama and he was going to have the power for drone assassinations. He was going to have the power to do a lot of these things. So is that any dynamic you see people not appreciating the bad emperor problem?
I think it's pretty striking. I can't think of anybody really considering the bad emperor problem besides a few of the voices that were generally critical. But I really can't. That didn't seem to be. Can you guys remember anything from conversations about it? Like what happens when Barack Obama's not president anymore?
Some people tried to offer that, and we were always kind of shouted down as the what is it, the regressive left? Yeah, we were. Oh, we just didn't like Obama because we're too far left, we're outside the mainstream. Or I definitely remember saying stuff like, wait until someone you don't like. Now, in fairness, I never thought Donald Trump. I never thought it was going to be someone so blatant who talks about beating people up. Or now today he called the press the quote enemy of the people unquote, which is, That's literally Stalinism. But I mean, I'm not saying he's a dictator. I'm just saying that's dictatorial language.
Nixonian.
Nixonian, at least. I think his campaign's very Nixonian. And Roger Stone's one of his accolades, so that makes it work. You agree, Joanne?
I do remember, but here's how I remember it. I remember people saying to the authoritarians, that generally on the right, saying, hey, how are you going to feel about this when Hillary Clinton has it? I do remember that conversation a lot of times. But my feed is generally people who are worried about this kind of thing, so I probably have a skewed view of it. But yeah, I do remember a lot of people saying, what is going to happen when Obama's not in office?
But there was also, and this goes to the Project Hemisphere point, that's interesting, is it's not just government power. It's private power that has grown up around the security state. And I don't know if you ever guys read Sheldon Wolin, which I really recommend, talked about the anonymity of the corporate state. So even without Trump, who I think on some level is damaging this just because he's so polarizing and incompetent, and he's in some sort of war with the CIA, which is kind of funny to watch. But previous to this, it wasn't just state power; it was private corporate power merged with state power. And Ken, you did a story on AT&T, and can you give like a little for people who don't know about this?
Sure. So the origins of Project Hemisphere or Operation Hemisphere, it started off as sort of a cooperation between the Drug Enforcement Administration and and AT&T, the Los Angeles Clearinghouse, the LA HITTA Clearinghouse. And what Project Hemisphere was and still is, it's an access to the largest metadata database in history that belongs to AT&T of all telephone calls that have been placed on AT&T infrastructure, some since 1986. Through Project Hemisphere, law enforcement agencies get access to this entire database and the sophisticated intelligence products that AT&T can create with it, tracking people over time, tracking people through different telephone numbers without a warrant. But without a warrant, it's not even really we'll wait to get more into details, but yeah, it doesn't require a warrant. I mean, there can be a warrant, but the point is that they also have administrative subpoena power because the requests are coming from the Department of Justice. Now, what I discovered recently and wrote about for the Daily Beast was that AT&T had taken this program and sort of monetized it to the fullest extent. And they've been marketing it to more and more agencies, anywhere from the DEA, Atlanta Police Department, to the Medicaid fraud units in Florida using it.
Right. And what's interesting is because of its secretive nature, I mean, there was at one point I almost seemed like a soft reference to it about drug issues in the New York Times, and then your report, which was a sort of exclusive breaking report about, because it's this private product or service, whatever, they actually kind of insist that people do something, which is probably the greatest threat to due process and of our time, and that may be a little hyperbolic, but which is parallel construction, meaning you don't explain how you got this evidence. We give this to you, and then you construct an alternative way you could have gotten to this evidence, which, of course, if you're good at doing that, then you can break the law all day long in your investigative, in your investigations, because then you're always creating a legal way to have done it. And if, the sort of quintessential Law and Order, they messed with the evidence and we had to throw it out. And he walks, well, actually, that's not even a problem if you're going to do parallel construction, right? Because you don't even really need to worry about procedure because you already know the answer.
Right. In the confidentiality conditions, and there's a huge list of the confidentiality clauses in this statement of work that I found for the Atlanta Police Department, it says that the Atlanta Police Department is not allowed to use the intelligence products provided by AT&T in criminal prosecutions. So they can't provide them as evidence. But it doesn't say actually in there that they have to engage in parallel construction. It's just pretty much the only implication that's there, because the Constitution guarantees us the right to face our accusers, to know the evidence against us, those kind of things, that you can't sell somebody an intelligence product or a criminal investigation product that's supposed to provide evidence and then say they can't use that evidence as part of the criminal proceedings without expecting parallel construction.
Right, because if you're telling me I'm an investigator, I'm an agent of the state, whether I be a police officer, or FBI agent, or whoever's accessing this product, I mean, you're telling me, okay, please, part of the conditions are you don't mention this or you don't use it for that. Oh, okay, I'm going to get the answer this way. And since I know what the answer is, right, I know that this person was at this place at this time talking about this subject matter. Now I have the whole world is open to me to try to find different ways to have gotten to that answer. In fact, if I have a CI who I'm not giving a lot of exposure to, I can feed them information that they could have told me. And I said, oh, I had a confidential informant. They told me that this person was there. You know what I mean? So I think there's just no way around, if you're going to let AT&T sell this, we're talking about selling a service, that of course this is going to be the consequence. I'm hard to imagine how it would not be, especially if you're even telling them. I don't know if this reminds you, Ken, of this, but like the Stingray use where they protect it. They actually threw, apparently, you probably know more about this. They like dropped a case. It would have involved. Yeah, in Florida, that's right. It's kind of, you know what I mean? Like, we're not going to even disclose our methods anymore. But since they have the methods and the tools, they're going to use them, which for me is just very concerning, because that just means I'm targeting you for whatever reason. And it could be ultimately, in this day and age, political. I've got you because through illegal means. Now all I have to do is find some plausible way to say I got this evidence. So I think, don't you think this would be, hasn't happened yet, or maybe it has, we don't know. Don't you think this is a tool for the Trump administration or any kind of abusive authoritarian administration, or to go after dissidents?
It's perfect. One of the primary purposes that Hemisphere provides serves is link analysis, and that's really simply that's looking and seeing what connections there are between people or points of data that you have in a system. So, like with Stingrays, or even worse, like with dirt boxes, which are like Stingrays, but they fly them overhead and swoop up as many as 10,000 different devices' signatures at once. They can then take all of that data, see whoever it is that you talk to, who those people talk to. Then do stuff like go through the phone, through the pictures on your phone if they've actually confiscated the phone. But the idea is that it's doing what they call lead generation. So maybe you don't ever plan on prosecuting the person who you have targeted specifically with Hemisphere. You are going to prosecute some of the people that you have come up with by analyzing that person's telephone number. Am that making sense so far?
Yeah.
So. And I pulled a little something that I wrote up about. This didn't make it into the story in the Daily Beast. It got cut, which I thought that was too bad because it's specifics. I found in Texas they had this thing called Operation Southern Flow. It was a Texas Border Narcotics Task Force. It was using Hemisphere to gain leverage against suspected cash mules. These people were transporting the drugs north, and after they sell it, they take the cash back down south to the cartels. Now, the problem that narcotics agents said they were having is they had been having success when the smugglers were moving north using their conventional investigative methods, because they are, and in the report itself, or the plan actually says here, because they are actively looking for a customer and cross their dope in small increments. Thus, police and confidential informants can infiltrate these organizations, eventually affect arrest, seizure, and prosecution. But when the quote-unquote drug mules were moving the cash back down south, they are, quote, no longer seeking customers. They are attempting to get the money from point A to point B as quickly as they can, making it hard to identify and infiltrate the trafficking organizations. So the Border Narcotics Task Force decided to use the Hemisphere as a sort of shortcut. So Operation Southern Flow took the intelligence gathered at checkpoints, all points of contact, so checkpoints, arrests, interdiction stops. And it says in the report that they'll use cellular telephone downloads, interviews, pocket trash, etc. And then agents at McAllen Intelligence Center will use the aggregate evidence to develop target packages on the critical individuals so that the investigative unit of the Interdiction Initiative can attempt to develop these individuals' informants. And so as part of this analysis, it says here, and it's just one little line, it says, bounce it off Hemisphere. So this is a situation where parallel construction is definitely going to be built in. You've got police using this secret tool to leverage confidential informants, to basically coerce confidential informants, catch them in the act, and then make them inform on the higher-ups in Mexico. The identity of those confidential informants is unlikely to ever be known. They're confidential informants, let alone the investigative method by which the lead was generated. But it's still, the final arrest is still the fruit of the poisonous tree. I mean, that's right. A matter of settled law.
Right. For those who don't understand this, I'm not trying to get too far in the weeds, but that's the whole, what you just, for the poisonous tree, which is this, we had this investigation and we can't use it if it's a product of an illegal search, hence parallel construction. Yes, I knew this information from an illegal search, but I don't have to disclose that. I can just create a parallel search that would have been legal because I already knew because I was illegally tapping. So this is going to be, there's so much, I mean, this is just like such an opening for abuse. Like, I can't even believe it.
Hey, when did Hemisphere start? And two-part question. Do we know when it started? And have we seen like an exponential increase in the number of informants since then?
I don't know the answer to informant. Hemisphere began in 2007 as Hemisphere, but if we rewind all the way back to 2003, the AT&T data center in San Francisco, we learned from, I guess they were sent to EFF, leaked to EFF, the motion proceedings. A technician who was working at the data center in San Francisco testified before a judge that his bosses had brought NSA employees in and instructed him to install a box into like tapping the line. Now I'm trying to remember, I'm going to get the name of the device wrong. I'm going to say it was Narus. Then in 2006, the New York Times had a story about the FBI using something called communities of interest. So communities of interest is kind of the predecessor to Hemisphere. What a community of interest is that it was something that AT&T had started creating back from a time when people still made long distance calls, and you could make an awful lot of illicit money from long distance fraud. So they were using these communities of interests, which were contacts for any one person's circle, all the people that this one person calls, plus all the people that they call. So 2 generations is the community of interest. Verizon had testified before Congress and sent a letter to Congress about data that had been requested from the FBI from them. And in their response, or what they were telling to Congress, they mentioned that the FBI had come to them asking them for communities of interest, which was something that they didn't have. Now, it turned out that AT&T had been spoiling the FBI, that they had been giving them all of this information. So this really sounds like a precursor to Hemisphere. And they also developed a processing language that went with the community of interest called Hancock. That also, it makes sense for them to be applying that to the database that they're using for Hemisphere too.
So I forget exactly what year it was, but it was during the Obama years. The telecom companies demanded retroactive immunity.
That was from Bush.
Yeah, that was Bush.
Oh, that was Bush. Okay, got it. And was that...
And they got it.
They got it, yeah.
Yeah, they did it. Do we know when Verizon started, if they have a similar product?
Almost positive they do. So Verizon's got the LERT, the Law Enforcement Response Team. Verizon also, they own the majority of the wireless infrastructure. So their data, what they have access to, is going to be more valuable to law enforcement now than necessarily AT&T's. Once they find a really good way to do the same thing that they do to CDRs, call detail records with Hemisphere, to IPDRs, Internet Protocol detail records, it's really going to balloon. Whoever develops that, which hasn't been done yet, because things like Skype, the VoIP communication services, their routing is not as clear and easy to parse, and it may go through different obscuring levels. People might use Tor, stuff like that. So there's not a good Hemisphere for IPDRs yet. There's going to be, and it's going to be hugely in demand, obviously, because of how much people are using this. This would be subject to surveillance.
And as a Verizon customer, I have because they have retroactive immunity, I have no recourse, right?
Nope. You got nothing.
No, you got to be a shareholder.
You have to be a big shareholder. But what's interesting, what I think the part of what Hemisphere, your story in particular, was useful, that aspect for what we're talking about, is because, Verizon and the telecom companies, their defense when what Joanne was talking about was happening, they said, we need retroactive immunity. We were just being patriots. We were just helping the government help terrorists. And what your article notes, and what I would bet anything with Verizon, is it's also, they're making money. This is also a service. They're not going to do this for free. And so while on the one hand, they want to say, we're just helping law enforcement because we want safe communities and we want to make sure the country doesn't get attacked, they're also going to make a ton of money. And of course, law enforcement's happy to play along, because it's not their money, right? They're happy to play along. So that's definitely going to be an aspect of this, which is they're not just collaborators or cooperators. They're selling a product to law enforcement.
Right. And so the law says that the data that's non-content data that is already in the phone company's possession, over. But AT&T and Verizon, these other companies, don't have to create these massive data sets. They don't have to do communities of interest. They are specifically developing their systems to profit off of them in relationships with law enforcement. And I can show you PowerPoint presentations from every year for the past 5 or 6 from several different firms and different consulting firms on CALIA opportunities for that year. That's opportunities to make money from I'm going to get it wrong, but essentially it's the law that says that law enforcement has to have access to the networks of communication providers to perform lawful intercept or pen registers.
Right. And I think that the sort of larger point, I don't know if you want to comment on this or not, but just from my perspective is it seemed like a lot of this tech, this sort of domestic surveillance technology, was developed for the drug war. So you had the drug war, and that was a justification for a lot of it. And this is an endless multi-billion-dollar war that, of course, how could you ever end it? In fact, the new administration with Jeff Sessions and with Donald Trump, who has come in during a heroin epidemic or an opioid epidemic, much of which comes from prescription abuse, meaning people are getting hooked on it by their doctors, not illegal activity, and has come in and said he's going to crack down. In fact, he's made the border, which is really strange, the border an issue of opioid abuse, which is ridiculous because opioids are illegal. These people are getting addicted legally. So, patrolling the border isn't going to stop bad prescriptions or doctors overprescribing pain meds because they don't want to do patient management like they're supposed to. They just want to take some pain meds and go away. So so Trump and Sessions are people who are absolutely invested in the drug war. But if you look at the progression to the overall, we've had this war on drugs started by Nixon. I think there's some evidence that it was about political dissidents. And according to one conversation, it was a way to get criminal charges on protesters. And now you've passed in through the post 9/11 security spending and reorientation blitz. So it seems like it took us a while to build this domestic surveillance system from the war on drugs to the 9/11 Patriot Act stuff. And no one ever really pushed it back at all or withdrew it at all. But now it's really well developed. I don't know. It's just an observation. But
So the same thing. So the border wall, the Secure Fence Act, 2005. It was a Bush initiative, as were many of these aerial surveillance programs. I can't remember the name of it. Operation Phoenix. Trump was looking for information on it. That's the National Guard's basically drone surveillance. They also use Lockheed to surveil the border. But those programs were expanded under Obama. Now, the Operation Phoenix was changed under Obama. They took a lot of the National Guardsmen off the ground and moved it all to aerial surveillance. But yeah, Obama was elected largely on the coattails of how abysmal President Bush was. And then he did several of his terrible things better, I guess. He classed up the joint a little bit. But that really is, and the difference so far that we can see between the practices in deportation for ICE now, I should just say the deportation position of the administration, is that Obama was not explicit about deporting people at a massive rate, and Trump is being explicit about it. But that's about it. If Trump continues at this rate, then he'll be something like 75,000 behind Obama for last year.
Right. Yeah. Trump's making a lot of noise. He's pissing people off with his rhetoric, which is very xenophobic and troubling. But if you look at his actual numbers, he's well behind Obama. He'd have to really up his game. So it's funny that more people are being forced to leave the country, deported under Obama than now, but he just wasn't. I've heard some Trump apologists, and I find this logic a little weak, but okay, saying that, well, because of his rhetoric is so unfriendly, to put it mildly, people are going to leave just because they don't want to take this verbal abuse. Which
that's part of the legal framework that they're trying to create, though. It's not just the rhetoric. I don't know if you guys remember a law that they passed in Alabama, where Jeff Sessions is from, in 2011, HB 56. It's essentially a self-deportation law, and that's a modus that both Trump and Sessions ascribe to. And basically the idea is to make life as miserable as possible for immigrants so that they will decide to leave by themselves. And in the projections that people have done for conducting mass deportations, they almost always include about a 2 million person fudge room for people who will self-deport, because people are going to want to avoid being incarcerated, to have their homes, the doors bashed down, that kind of thing.
Well, Steve Bannon had this. Is this what you're talking about? Because he said, I think he did say at one point he was modeling it off of some programs. So Steve Bannon wants it may be an executive order, maybe part of an immigration reform package. Basically, you can't ever get any public service. It's impossible. You can't send your kids to school. You can't do anything. And that he's selling it as a way of getting rid of freeloaders. But if you look at the way most Americans live, most Americans at one point or another use a public service. It's a very It's a good thing from my perspective. Yeah, and they pay right. Immigrants pay taxes. So that is this kind of Bannon's theory that he wants the president to enact, which is to say that unless you have no documentation problems, no citizenship issues, unless you are in that particular category or class, which is what we think we're trending towards, if we're not already there, you cannot get any public services anywhere. No college. You can't go to community. You can't even go to community college, let alone get a scholarship. And that seems to is that kind of like the idea of make it hell, and so they'll self-deport because there's just no opportunities?
Basically, yeah. I mean, so in Alabama, they did some of those things. You know, they're restricting access to welfare organizations or welfare funds. A huge part of that law was also I can't remember the exact phrasing, but it's something like no court of law shall enforce the terms of any contract entered into knowingly with an undocumented immigrant. So they were being ripped off left and right. Yeah, they were repossessing people's cars. They were getting day laborers, and then the day laborers were getting sent off from work with a pistol. But those kind of things. And I haven't heard or read anything about Bannon's specific plans, but I think Bannon actually more or less takes a few pages out of Sessions' book. I'm trying to find the quote right here. It's an old interview that Bannon did on the illegal immigration problem. I want to say it's from 2014 when they were debating DACA.
Yeah, he's anti-DACA too. He's basically, there's no, I mean, if you listen to what him and I think Steve Miller say, one of Trump's advisors, their view is they want a total freeze. They don't want, their problem is with legal immigrants. They're not even just, which everybody couches as a law enforcement issue or a rule of law issue. They don't want legal immigrants.
Right. Sessions has been complaining widely about not just DACA, about the visa lottery, and then about what they call chain immigration. So there's really only two ways besides the immigration lottery that you can come into the United States as an immigrant legally. You can come in on the HB1 work visas, any of the work visas, but there's not really any unskilled work visas. Right. Or you can come in as a family member. The family member can apply for a visa on your behalf, immediate family only. Sessions calls that chain immigration, and he wants to get rid of it too.
Right, which is I think goes back to probably Hart-Sellers or the 65 law. I'm not sure on that, but so fact check everybody. But I believe the reason we had this law that they're furious about, this 1965 Hart-Sellers, which was really one of the first laws to take a kind of non-racialized view of U.S. immigration, which previous to that was just really pretty blatantly racist. Obviously, remember the Chinese Exclusion Act and other things. But that was supposed to be for people who had family members, particularly in Europe. This is a post-World War II bill. And obviously, some of the people who use it were people who were in Mexico and other places. And now they're furious that this happened because of its quote-unquote demographic threat. So now they not just people should understand this. They don't just want to get rid of illegal immigrants. Right. The rule of law stuff is, I'm not saying they don't want to get rid of them too, but it's almost a smokescreen. They ultimately do just want a total and complete pause. They say pause on immigration. And I mean, you can read that a number of ways. You can read that as sort of a racial anxiety. You can read that as a partisan idea, right? I mean, if Trump actually does deport 11 million people and just scare the hell out of people, even people who are legal citizens, by the way, who got in under being born here, it probably will help his reelection chances.
You mean anchor babies, Dan?
Yes. I mean ships that fly in the night. No. So it just seems like this is, I don't know which is a worse interpretation. It's cynical partisanship to just deport people who are going to vote against you, or it's like a sort of racial anxiety. I don't know. I don't know which is worse, but they're both pretty bad.
Sessions wrote a memo to the GOP, all GOP members of Congress in 2013, and it said that it was time for all of them to drastically reorient their positions toward immigration and adopt an honest and humble populism. And that seems a little bit prescient to me. I think, Sessions is racism, which I'm not going to call him a racist, but people say he's a member of the Klan. People of Sessions' make and caliber, they don't wear hoods. They stir up the people who wear the hoods.
Right. Like white concerned citizens, or whatever the hell that group was. I mean, there's a genteel people who associate more with the Southern planter class, and then there's this sort of low down, kind of like grittier, like, nah, I just hate them. But then there's this other group of people who are kind of have a sort of, they rile him up, they play to him. And they also probably have some of these views, but they'll like cloud it in like, eugenics or.
Oh, that's, yeah.
It's about IQ. So, yeah, I agree. I think that's what Sessions represents. And it's amazing that he wasn't even more controversial, given what I thought it was clearly a nominee who represented that kind of, I mean, just even the way he talked about the demographic issues, it was clear who he was. In the age of Trump, I don't even know I say dog whistle anymore, because this is like a air horn. You know what I mean? Like it used to be so coded. Lee Atwater, the great political strategist, did an interview with The Nation and said, we used to just use racial epithets against, these people. And now we have to couch it in these abstract terms like, welfare. And it seems like Trump is kind of, I don't want to say Trump's racist per se, because I think he would love anybody who was willing to love him back. But he does seem to kind of like just have reversed the process. Like, we're getting rid of all the abstraction and getting right back to where we started.
He's politically correct. It's the same thing. Yeah, so I quickly, here's what Bannon said about Sessions and immigration 2013. He's doing a radio show. He says, Senator Sessions lays out a pretty tough case against Boehner's immigration reform plan. It's really an amnesty program that somehow everybody there should get a hearing, and this could go on for years. They should be processed and deported immediately. So he wants to deny due process.
Right, and ICE made a statement recently that seemed, on one hand, you're like, yes, they said explicitly, hey, anybody who's here without documentation is liable to be deported, as a very sort of totalistic statement. And on one hand, you go, well, I guess that's technically right. If you don't have the documents, you can be deported. But what that means in practice now, with this rhetorical framing of immigration, is it means we're just going to start looking for people to deport. And it kind of reminds me a lot of the Arizona law that was nicknamed, the sort of papers, please law, which is we're actually not just going to say, deny services or whatever. We're going to actually start looking for, it's going to be kind of a manhunt. And we're going to go through. And then we have now, since we're enforcing immigration law and these are high immigration areas, we can do dragnets. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if you started seeing what you see for, on Saturday night to get drunk drivers. You just have people out there, right? Kind of random stops. Show us your papers. So it's a different, I agree, like Trump's so incompetent or inefficient so far that he doesn't have the level of Obama's hitting. But he is, I agree with you, hitting a different rhetorical tone that will have implications, I think at least, because it's going to be just a terrible environment.
Alabama's law was actually had all the elements of Arizona's plus the self-deportation elements. It was that when they came out, there was like, it's worse than Arizona's law. Both of them were written by Chris Kobach.
Right, who they wanted for DHS at one point.
Yeah. So that's, I do think that that when you look at the past 5 years of history and you see all these people sitting at the same tables and having the same discussions about what they want to have happen, a lot of it actually ties back to a few organizations that are linked to the John Tanton Network. It's Numbers USA, Center for Immigration Studies, Fair US, and stands for something with immigration. They all claim to be pro-legal immigration. And then there's another one that's connected to them that's called negative population growth that really hits on the Malthusian theories that, with every immigrant that comes in, they're going to bring in 5 more, and eventually we're not going to be able to feed Americans. And Sessions, when he lays into the economic aspects, what he perceives as the economic aspects of immigration, that's really that he's driving at that. That we're somehow, with every brown mouth that comes across the border, we're taking food from the mouths of a white kid.
Right, but it's funny because it's funny that this is the way they're framing it, because the actual issue economically from a demographic perspective is it's what's happening here and in Western Europe and also in Asia, partly because of a one-child policy. That's probably was a big mistake. Is it's a low fertility rate. No one's actually, they're not getting overwhelmed. What's actually happening is people, partly because of women's liberation movement, because maybe they want to get educated or have children later in life. There's just a lower fertility rate, and that's what's actually. It's not like they're flooding. They're actually, if you look at Hispanic, for example, which is the great current concern, I guess, they're just hitting replacement. They're hit 2.8. Average white families hitting 1.8. So they're not hitting replacement level demographics here or in Western Europe. So It's not really like the immigrants are just flooding. you have a shortage because for whatever reason, and I don't have any children, so there you go. There's another. We're not replacing. So what do you exactly want to do if you're not going to have children? I mean, like, what exactly is supposed to happen here?
Shakers. We'll do shakers.
Yeah, right. Good furniture. We'll have great furniture. Yeah. But other than that, it doesn't. But I agree that there's this, or at least I would assert that this legal versus illegal thing is a smokescreen for a demographic anxiety. Yes. And maybe I'm wrong to be so cynical. I just don't think it's really what's driving these people.
I was just say it doesn't compute. I mean, it doesn't compute economically.
Right. That's one of the reasons I don't believe it. But it has. You're right in terms of the last few years, because I remember in 2012 when Mitt Romney said his immigration plan was self-deportation. Yep. And everyone laughed at him and said, what a ridiculous self-deportation. What are you, a moron? No one's going to self-deport. Why would they do that? They came here for a reason. And now it's, I guess I didn't, those of us who scoffed, which I think was a majority, didn't understand that, well, self-deportation might make sense if the alternative is you're just harassed on the street every day by the police, or put in these, Shadowproof is doing some stuff on at these detention centers.
Oh yeah.
I mean, so maybe we didn't appreciate that self-deportation would work if you really made people's lives miserable and they just wanted to.
The other term for it, actually, it's more descriptive. I think it's attrition through enforcement. The idea is sort of like you just didn't enforce the immigration laws that we have already. But so some of this is a little bit comical in what they say about the rule of law too. I mean, so many of the amnesties granted that they're complaining about under Obama were granted with the same powers that Trump is now wielding as freely as he likes. So, I mean, they're not counter-constitutional. They are built into the Constitution. I don't think most people really grasp that our Constitution doesn't prescribe that things have to be good. We can, on the next opportunity, we can have a constitutional convention and cede the power to vote away forever. That's built into the Constitution. We can do it. Of course, most of these things probably aren't actually misunderstandings. Mr. Sessions is a JD. Mr. Bannon's an intelligent man. They are ways they have found to phrase these things that suit their political purpose.
Right.
I think the other thing that, I don't know, some people talk about it, but I agree it's a demographic anxiety, but I think it's also, we're seeing that the Republican Party is really feeling an existential threat. I mean, they're not going to be around much longer. They're not going to have any chance to compete unless they can change the situation. Now, they could change their policies, they could change, but, I think they're looking for some other ways to advantage themselves. But I think it's just dawning on them now that this is really going to happen.
Yeah,
that they're actually going to do the deportations. You mean
that they have a real existential threat right now because of the demographic changes.
Well, see, there was this autopsy report where they kind of, I don't know if you remember this, Ken. There was after they lost the 2012 election, there was something called the Republican autopsy. I think the Republican National Committee did it, and they said, if we can't lose Hispanics. And one of the funny things was Mitt Romney lost Hispanics partly because talked about self-deportation, which they found offensive, not surprisingly. And they said, we can't lose, if we keep doing this, we can't be a national party anymore. And a lot of people thought Trump, when he went up there and gave his Jack Kerouac free association, the rapist, and he said, that's it. We can't win this election. We're never going to get the Hispanic vote. I guess they didn't understand that he was going to turn up so much racial anger in the Rust Belt states, and that he was going to get the great fortune of running against one of the most unpopular politicians in the history of this country, that he was actually going to win. And actually, Paul Ryan said on the election, I can't believe he won. And so now maybe they're actually saying, you know what? We have been trying something else called voter suppression, and that's helped Republicans win. That's how they took those governorships and state legislatures they keep crowing about taking. They took it through voter suppression. Okay, so if we do lots of deportation and lots of voter suppression, maybe we don't have to really deal with the demographic reality because we can change the demographic reality. Does that make sense, Ken? Or
I think that's Bannon. And maybe Sessions some to a T. But I mean, I think Bannon has been involved in this, and I'm not sure what his motives are, what his stakes are. But there's some really good work that The Spectator did on this associations between Bannon and Brexit and Breitbart London and Farage. And apparently, he went over there at the beginning of the Brexit campaign, helped set up the Breitbart London office. And then according to staffers in the Breitbart London office, it essentially became the UKIP's comm office, and they weren't even allowed to criticize Farage. So they Breitbart flew Farage over here sometime, I guess it was around CPAC 2015. There's a great picture of him smoking a cigar, and it says, "The British are coming." Breitbart News. And now, the Breitbart has set up satellite locations in South Africa, Germany, and I think there's one in France. And there's significant pushing of Le Pen. I'm not sure if anybody's agenda, if there's some monolithic agenda that this is working behind. But I've watched a lot of videos. I've paid an awful lot of attention to these sort of the nationalists, ethno-nationalists, those people. And there is a common theme and there's a spectrum of how explicit they are about it. But the common theme is there.
Well, I mean, they kind of use language. So if you listen to the coded language, even though it seems much more explicit, they will use. So Steve Bannon, is on tape and elsewhere. He's talking about the West. He addressed a Catholic conference saying we need a church militant, or we're going to lose our Western civilization. We're going to lose all that's been. He keeps using the word bequeathed to us, which I guess he means sort of like a long line of great
white people,
European Christian civilization, and we're going to destroy it if we let the demographics change, or I guess embrace non-conservative culture. So it seems, but I think, and he kind of, it's funny, he shuns the alt-right. They shun the alt-right, but it doesn't seem like there's actually that much substantial difference. It's just people like Richard Spencer are just very explicit. Is that a bad read on it? Maybe.
No, I mean, I think that Bannon. So Bannon says he's an economic nationalist, not a white nationalist or not a white supremacist. But if you break down what it means to be an economic nationalist, it has all the same implications. There's a guy. It's American Renaissance. The man's name is Jared Taylor. He's another one of these alt-right figures. And Jared Taylor, his illustration for the inability of non-whites to maintain Western civilization is Katrina. He says, "Look at Katrina. What happened with all the black people?" Yeah, it's Katrina. I can send you the video. Yeah. He's got it's very scientific stuff. One of the videos is called "Why Blacks Riot." The video on whites hand Trump a great victory is pretty good. But this guy tells colonialism jokes. I mean, he's a real winner. But if you look at his video about Katrina, that's part of where it carries over. In the economic nationalism, they are mind frames that see the propagation of other culture as a threat to our own, as if they are somehow discrete, as if Western civilization didn't adapt to all of these other parts of culture to it. Like there's not, right. It's, I mean, they are all based fundamentally on fallacies, and they are incorporating some new science with some of the old social Darwinism, the good old 1850s stuff. But it's still bogus science.
Right. But it's funny is like, if economics used to be called political economy. Like most people who understand, I mean, there's even a sort of devil's dictionary, I guess that's Ambrose Bierce or whatever, saying that, economics is just politics masquerading as science. And that to say something's like, this is just my economic position is so, I guess that's kind of, maybe they learned that from the libertarians. They just pretend that all your political beliefs are actually just economic beliefs. And how dare you try to take this out of the objective reality of, I'm just correct. It has nothing to do with what
I don't hate black people. I'm just fiscally conservative.
Right. IQ. Remember IQ, which was promoted. I remember just this coming back up during that New Republic rendering of garments when there was that mass quitting, and that people remember when Andrew Sullivan promoted the bell curve? And then it was completely destroyed by everyone because there's no real, first of all, IQ isn't that determinative. And actually, when you look at it, it's not even true. So real quick before you go, one of the issues with this massive security state we've talked about being built up, given that there's increasingly little legal opposition or things that can be done to stop it as a structure because it's either parallel construction or they've just changed the law and the Patriot Act and other things, is you will have people who see things and are morally offended, meaning whistleblowers. And it was sad for me to see that Thomas Drake was included in a piece you did about insider threats and about cracking down on whistleblowers when Thomas Drake, actually, one of the reasons he wasn't prosecuted, we actually talked recently with John Kiriakou, who was prosecuted, but is Thomas Drake actually performed the correct procedure. He went to Congress, he did things, that's why he wasn't prosecuted, because he followed the steps you're supposed to. and yet still he was a picture of him was there in the insider threat program.
He was prosecuted.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's right. I'm sorry. He
ended up pleading guilty to a misdemeanor, but they charged him with the same stuff they charged Chelsea Manning with. They charged him with the Espionage Act. Eventually, the judge said, "Look, he didn't do anything. You let him plead to a misdemeanor."
Right. Okay, so I guess I'm just trying to think of what their pretext would be to have him be the epitome of an insider threat when he's a whistleblower. So it seems to me that maybe what's going to happen in the Trump era when we have whistleblowers?
Yeah.
Let's talk about the insider threat.
So that presentation it was done by Patricia Larson of the Office of Director of National Intelligence. ODNI with the FBI has a National Insider Threat Task Force, and it was formed after the Snowden releases. Part of this presentation, one of the slides was those who have done us harm, and it's got Thomas Drake and Snowden. And they're right next to, is it Aaron Alexis, the Navy Yard shooter? Trying to remember some of next to murderers, Robert Hansen. Spies and murderers. They've got them, and they characterize these insider threats not so much by a pattern of harm that they cause, although Alexis, they say what happened with him. It's by the sort of this profile, especially, like with Snowden and with Drake, it's supposedly this egomaniacal ideology. Moralism, sort of.
Moralism.
They look pathological moralism, pathological ethics. It's not only are these people wrong for having given away this information, they're sick. They are driven by delusions of their own righteousness. What's funny, Patricia Larson says, Snowden said he did these releases because the U.S. Spying apparatus is massive and we're spying on everybody. And obviously we're not. Well, yes, you are. You clearly are. That's not even a matter for contention.
Right.
They called him a narcissist a lot, too.
Narcissist. Actually, that was in there, too. That's where I was trying to think of.
Yeah. And that he knows better. He thinks he knows better than this whole, hundreds and thousands of years, accumulated years of the whole intelligence community.
The whistleblowers are, this is, I guess, the sort of meta question. Are they wrong when they see that whistleblowers are a threat? It looks like forget beyond the people who actually did wrong, committed murder or something. But if you're looking at the system as a system, the real threat are whistleblowers, even though they are not legally or morally in the wrong. In fact, they're legally okay, and they're morally, that's a different question, but just the threat is not external so much as people having a problem with what we're doing. Does that make sense?
I think most of the time whistleblowers, certainly Thomas Drake, he was whistleblowing because they were defying the system, the checks and balances in the system, and trying to operate outside of it. So you can look at it a couple of different ways. I think, as much as I like to do what I want, I feel like us being human animals, we need walls and some sort of rules to behave. So we need institutions. But I think that the Trump administration is going to be a special kind of wild card, because it's not going to be threats to the whistleblowers aren't going to be threats to institutions, and the institutions are not going to necessarily revolt against them, but they're going to have somebody who is vengeful. He's been pretty explicit that he's going to get back to the people who are mean to him.
And he's going to get back to the quote unquote low life leakers, unquote.
They're going to pay. Yeah, he said they will pay.
They will. So he's got a lot of tools to hurt them. It's not an idle threat.
Yeah. Oh yeah, he really does. And that's, I think about this sometimes. So they look at the torture report. We didn't get very much of it. What we know about is the stuff that we have found out about, the means that Trump has, and the operations that he has at his disposal under secret law that we haven't been allowed to read. The Brennan Center's got a great article about all this secret law. He's got reams and reams of statute, and it's statute. It might as well be law, that we don't know that they are powers that he has, and he's creating it by the day. So,
well, he said he wants to bring back torture. He said it explicitly, and then he said, well, the general said it doesn't work so well. I'm going to defer to General Mattis on this, which is really a kind of a strange view to say, I really want to do something that's blatantly illegal, but, well, I guess as long as the general I put in charge of it is against it, he won't carry forth my policy.
I wonder if they're going to actually erode the Whistleblower Protections Act. They could change that espionage law. They could create a new one. There's a lot of things they can do. And I really don't agree with leaking conversations from the Oval Office. There's one thing. I don't know. I really think that was a big mistake. But the other, the stuff that we do need to know, they're setting a precedent. They're really kind of turning the country by, let's just say, let me rephrase it. The whole issue with leaking conversations with foreign leaders from the Oval Office, I suspect that's not going to be really popular. You're not going to get a lot of support for the people who did that, like you would a Snowden, a Thomas Drake, or whatever. But he can take that and he can use that as a springboard to crack down on that espionage law. I mean, this could be really bad.
Well, this threat from what you're saying is what Ken mentioned earlier, which is competence. If he was as malevolent and competent as some of the other people we've had there, and maybe Bannon and other people are, he would use this as a pretext to completely purge all the intelligence services of people who are against him, and to put down administrative controls that would make it almost impossible, the real kind of counter intelligence program within the intelligence program of anyone who would be a whistleblower, and just really lock it up. And then you'd have what I think goes to the point about Thomas Drake and the profile is we don't want people who question orders. We don't want people who have an issue who get an order from a person and they just follow it. And anyone who has a problem doing that is a threat. And if Trump actually used this as a pretext to decapitate any dissent within the intelligence services and then locked it down like that, then you've really got the gears turning at full speed. And I don't know what happens next. Ken, you have thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. I'm pretty worried about it.
Yeah, I just read something today too, saying that Pence is known for really not wanting anyone to question. He just wants people who follow orders, and that there's a lot of signs that Pence he's basically put his people in across all these different agencies and departments, and it looks like he's going to be running the show. So anyway, he's very compatible with Trump in the "don't question my orders" department.
That's what I always say to people who are saying we want to go impeach Trump. I go,
yeah, I mean,
you want Pence to be president? This guy can actually get stuff done.
Well, even Pence was gone. I mean, you end up with Paul Ryan once you get rid of Pence. There's not a scenario under which there's constitutional crisis and then President Clinton, but
well, that didn't happen with Nixon. Nixon kind of arranged it to put who he wanted in office, right?
Yeah,
right.
Thank God it was a Spiro Agnew.
I think that if there was a higher level of competence in the White House right now, they'd have the leaker. Honestly, I mean, with as porous as things are right now, you could put out calculated leaks and figure out who was.
Yeah, how many people would have access to a intercept like that? It's not the phone book. It's probably roughly maybe a dozen people, maybe 50 people. There's the conspiracy theories already that Obama wrote this law to expand the amount of people who saw NSA stuff just to screw Trump, but I don't really think so. I think Obama did everything he could to kind of peacefully transition power, right or wrong. But in any case, it's not that many people. It's not that many people that would have access to that information. And if you were at all competent, you could just simply do chain of evidence. Who actually saw this? Okay, put them in a room. Where were you? I mean, this is right. They find leakers all the time. What
if it was encrypted, though? Are you saying they could find out who actually?
I would not be surprised, by the way, if one of the things that comes out of this is the Trump administration starts keeping tabs on journalists. I mean, why wouldn't they? David Ignatius and the Washington Post had access to 9 intelligence officials who confirmed this stuff. If you're Trump, don't you want to know who David Ignatius and these other people are talking to all the time? Don't you have the resources to put 24-hour surveillance on them? Don't you have? Don't they use AT&T or Verizon? Don't they make calls?
I can only imagine how many investigative demands have gone to Twitter already for these rogue accounts, whether they're complying with them or not. I mean, investigative demands, they might even be national security letters. He's got somebody in the DOJ right now. I'm sure he will sign just about any NSL he wants, Jeff Sessions. But actually, I mean, I was kind of more thinking that what they do is you put out leaks to different people. You give information to different people, see what gets leaked out, and it's just sort of tested through the dissemination.
National Guard, for example,
like the National Guard, right?
That's the old-fashioned. That's the old-fashioned way, right? I mean, that's what they used to do before they had technology.
But I think that that's probably still how people in the CIA would do it. I think that if Trump had more people in the intelligence community on his side at this point, he would probably be doing better combating his leakers. He made a pretty stupid call in openly starting a fight with people.
What is this, Nazi Germany?
Oh my God.
Well, I guess so, bud. I guess you answered your own question on that one. And just a point for people to know before, as we're closing out here, Twitter and Facebook are not going to fight for your private information. I don't know why people think. So something happened, for example, in the inauguration protest, and there were protesters who got, they did black bloc stuff, which typically is not violent towards people, but towards property. Fine. Twitter and Facebook have been hit from the DC Police Department for information on the people who protested, whether it be Antifa or whether they be anarchists or black bloc or people who were there. And Facebook gave it to them with no problems. Yeah. They're not going to fight for you. They're not going to help you. Twitter and Facebook are companies. And yes, maybe Jack Dorsey wears a shirt, #StayWoke. He is not going to fight for you in court. So for people who are out there doing activism, please understand that. Wink, wink. So Ken, do you have anything as we close out here? Anything you're working on? People should check out your work, or something you're interested, you're going to pursue?
Everything right now, I'm kind of fishing in on Trump. I'm looking at the deportation stuff, but no, I can't think of anything. This was a lot of fun. We should do it again soon.
Let's
absolutely. Thank you so much.
Great, Ken. Thank you.
Thanks, bud. Appreciate it.
See you on Twitter.
Have a good one. Cool. Okay, that's our show. I want to thank you for listening, and a special thank you to Kenneth Lipp for talking to us today and giving us a great interview. You can follow Ken's work at Kenneth Lipp, Lipp, on Twitter. You can check his articles out at the Daily Beast and elsewhere. I'm sure he'll have a lot more to say and write about on these topics we discussed. Please support the show at Patreon if you can, patreon.com/AroundTheEmpire. Just $5 a month really helps us put on the show. And in that regard, I want to thank John Newport, Justin Perkins, and Nancy Vall for being our most recent Patreons. Thank you so much. Questions, comments, want to yell at me? Dan@shatterproof.com. And please check out my and Joanne's work at shatterproof.com. Thanks for listening. See you next time.